Welcome to Season 3 of the Strange, Rare, and Peculiar podcast, a place where we explore the past, present, and future of homeopathy from the perspective of a couple of insiders who have been around the homeo block a couple of times.
Homeo block? Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning.
And a very fine hello.
Care for a shortbread?
No, I have a Madeleine.
There you go.
Because it's tea time.
It's tea time.
Afternoon.
And it's Friday, and it's autumnal, and it shouldn't be because it's still August.
No, it should be because it's been hot.
How hot?
I don't like the heat. It's too hot for me. It's been hot and humid to the point where we had to buy a dehumidifier because it was raining in our kitchen. Put the air conditioning on and the humidity would just like sit, and it started to rain in there. And
it feels like a hot summer because our squashes are ahead of where they should be, right?
Yeah, we have.
Look at that warty
We've got
thing.
we did a funny little thing. We might have talked about this before, I'm not sure, but it seemed like a great idea at the time. We put decorative I feel like we did talk about this. We put decorative pumpkins in front of our front door last year, and then as they kind of got eaten by squirrels, and then, as they kind of broke down as the season went on, they self-seeded, and we let them go, not knowing, because there was like a pile of pumpkins and gourds, and now there are these huge vines, and so we decided to buy trellises to put them up, and we thought, oh, won't that be nice in the entranceway, except they're gigantic.
So lovely.
And if it's wet, you walk through like wet pumpkin to get in the house.
You got to run the gauntlet.
Yeah.
It's somewhat damp.
It's ridiculous, but we do have these really cute little gourds. But to have gourds on the table on August 1st seems like
Yeah, it is. It's
ahead of time. But I think the tea's ready.
I'll be the judge of that.
Okay, you judge that then.
So I think it's time to talk about the most misunderstood, misused, and poorly understood term in all of homeopathy.
Which is saying a lot.
It is.
And that term is constitution.
Consta-bloody-tution.
Consta-bloody-tution. Do you know, ironically, I grew up on Constitution Road.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, say more about Constitution Road and Constitution.
Well, I
What
don't
is
think
a
I don't
constitution?
want to really talk about I don't want to say much about Constitution Road. However, I do think that talking about this term constitution is important. I mean, I think it's important for all of us, right? So for folks who are just kind of new to homeopathy, there is a real trend in what people think this constitutional remedy is and what it will do, which what it is expected to do is like a lot.
Well, I think that's the point. And so we've already started and we've used the term differently. And it is actually around etymology.
It is. And that's what I think, even for those of us who've been around the block a couple of times, I think we will often, just because it's the colloquial term for chronic remedy, we will often say, oh, I'm going to give them a constitutional. I stopped doing that.
I never said that.
Oh, come on.
No.
For real? Never?
Never.
I don't believe you.
No.
You never said constitutional remedy.
No, I always felt uneasy about the whole term, and very early on in my practice.
For real?
Yeah.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, because I realized that when people talked about constitutional remedies, they didn't know what they were talking about.
Wow, well, weren't you just the early scholar?
I'll take that. But seriously, because, you read, it's quite strange. When you start to engage in homeopathy and you've got a range of materia medica books, you realize that the remedies are being spoken about differently in these different textbooks.
That's correct.
And I felt very uncomfortable about, reading about Miss Pulsatilla.
Oh, totally.
And, the smelly, ragged philosopher.
Right.
And, the personalization of what was and should be a list of symptoms collated from a proving.
Right. So let's start let's just start with what constitution is. What is the Constitution?
Well, and I think that's the next point. So there's no doubt that there is such a thing as a constitution.
Yeah.
And that everyone's got one. And that Hahnemann talks about constitution totally happily.
Well, he does, but it's interesting because I pulled all the references in the Organon.
Yeah,
Of course I did.
Of course you did.
I know. Just call me
called me
Hermione
Mr.
Granger. I know. I was doing it as a projection to, But you have a problem on your hands.
I've got too few hands.
No, the problem is that we've got the big pot of tea and no thing to put the tea in right here. Is there something you can grab out of that little cupboard? We don't want bitter tea for the second cup.
No, you just keep talking.
Okay, I'll just keep talking. So the reason though that we decided to talk about this is that there are it happens a lot when we're interviewing new students for who are going to attend AG or doing our free summer series lectures where people are just chatting and so it's one of the questions that comes up a lot. And so people will say things like, how long does it take for the homeopath to find someone's constitutional remedy? I think that's the most common thing.
I mean, the way that it used to come up for me...
Wait, stay closer to the microphone. You're far away.
Okay, hang on. How it used to come up for me was actually a totally different and also a misused term. There'd be a phone call back in the days when, you picked up your phone. And inevitably, someone would say, I'd like to book in with you. Are you a classical homeopath?
No, they used to say a constitutional prescriber.
Well...
Do you remember that?
That one didn't happen for me so much.
No?
Are you a classical prescriber? And my answer would inevitably be, well, it depends on what you mean by classical, because what I mean by classical means Hahnemannian, but I have a suspicion that you're talking about Kantian prescribing. And so these two things get conflagrated or mixed up or, confused. And I must admit I went on a big dive, a bit like you really. I went on a big journey because I wrote that chapter in my method book about constitution and constitutional prescribing.
Yes.
And so...
I have to say that for me was the first time that it really clicked.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that.
No worries.
Yeah, no worries, mate.
And so, when you think about it, that term classical is usually associated with music.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, you're going to hate this, but it's definitely associated with cricket.
I'm not going to hate that. Why would I hate that?
Well, because,
I like cricket.
Sporting analogies don't tend to fall so flash in the home.
You know what? It's been... What was the cricket match where they got cheated? That was in summer of 2019, July.
Are you referring to the Poxy English
Cricket
who
World
stole
Cup?
The World Cup final?
Cricket World Cup. See?
The...
I'm interested in it. I was mostly interested in it because you were using your VPN and all the commercials were Indian astrologers.
Oh, that was amazing.
I loved that.
Yeah.
That was really good. So I was watching it more for the Indian astrologer commercials. But
we were in a glass box in Canada.
Oh, it was the best vacation.
Watching the World Cup final.
Ever. We did a writing retreat in Nova Scotia and we rented this most amazing house. Anyway, we digress.
Sorry about the slur. But
you should be.
And so that's when I started really wrestling with it, because I realized that in the public domain, people have this idea about constitutional prescribing and classical homeopathy. And of course, because I'm a bit of a geek, I went, well, how the hell did that happen? Because Hahnemann never talked about constitutional prescribing.
Mm-mm.
How did it, who introduced it into our literature? And of course, for me, the answer I landed on was it all begins with Kent.
Except, even though I'm Kent curious in many ways, but not a super fan for a variety of reasons. But I'm gonna use Kent's own words to say that he did not. It's not Kent's problem.
It's not Kent's problem.
No, but let's get there first by
it's
talking
someone
about
else's problem.
Well, yes, there are a few, but
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's an SCP.
So someone else's problem. I like it. Okay, so the origin though of the term constitution goes way back. So constitution goes back to Hippocratic and Galenic times.
Right.
Yeah. And it was basically it refers to your unique body makeup. And so a person in Hippocratic terms who was in health would have an appropriate balance of the elements. And so constitution and temperaments and humors kind of all go together, right? So the humors being blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. And then, of course, the temperaments being phlegmatic, choleric, sanguine, and melancholic. Yeah. So, and then you keep going, and then you get up to the beginning of the sort of the actuarial sciences. That was in the 19th century when those things collided, which is really interesting to me because that's the time period of Hahnemann when Hippocratic medicine gave way to biomedicine. And one of the things that happened in the in-between spaces was this actuarial analysis of who was more likely to die of something. That was sort of the beginning of like actuarial tables and things.
You're using actuarial actually in the insurance business.
Yeah, but it was even before that. It was like this sort of predictability.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, let me throw in another flavor then, because if you think about all of the options that are around, then there is one straight up constitutional prescribing kind of medicine, and it's Ayurveda.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Because in Ayurveda, the physician's job, the practitioner's job is to identify the makeup and the predominance of the doshas.
Right. So like if you're a Vata Pitta mix, that's going to tell you what your diet should be and should you drink cold drinks or not.
Well, it also is a predictor of health, and it tells a physician therefore which herbs to use, which ones not to use, which, panchakarma, purification, blah blah.
Yep. I love that.
And so there is a very ancient 4,000 to 5,000 years of constitutional prescribing. Now, that is not how homeopathy is
exactly.
started.
But that ain't homeopathy. Homeopathy is not based on this idea of the constitution. And so let's just sort of get because the idea of the chronic, if we're going to talk about constitution, we have to talk about how that plays in and how it changed over time. We also have to talk about how the term sort of constitutional remedy has come on board that gets confused with the chronic remedy. And it's all wrapped up in this idea that homeopaths treat the whole person, but they don't.
Well, who started saying that?
That's post-Kent.
I think you're right. I actually think it's tied up with a topic that we spoke about recently around the Flexner report.
Yeah.
Because the idea that homeopathy is oriented towards the treating of the totality of characteristic symptoms.
Exactly.
Is how it started. And yet, somehow, into our language, or the language around homeopathy, and I believe that it's early 20th century, we start to hear about, no, we treat the whole person.
Exactly.
And
that's a way, actually, that people in contemporary times have sort of gotten away with sort of homeopathy as not medicine, because homeopathy,
exactly
right?
It.
So it also has gotten muddied and more difficult because of the ways in which homeopaths have to separate what we do. We help people to maintain health and balance as opposed to treat disease. But in actuality, the signs and symptoms that a homeopath is looking for are of the disease, not of the person.
I think in the legal, ethical environment in the early 20th century, where chiropractors and osteopaths and herbalists were going to jail for practicing medicine without a license,
right?
It became very important to separate oneself from, doing that, and therefore into homeopathy would have come some of that languaging.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have to be clear. Like, you might say one thing in the legal context, understanding what it means in that range, but a homeopath does not treat the whole person. It treats the signs and symptoms of the disease that affect or have the potential to affect every aspect of the being, mental, emotional, and physical. So it is treating the entirety of the suffering person. So the first time that Hahnemann talks about it is in aphorism 6. Now, I've got my Wenda O'Reilly, and it's not my favorite translation, but I do like it as a student textbook. So forgive me if you are like me, a person who has their favorite translation, but because I teach from this and I like it as the Organon textbook. And for those of you out there who might be saying, well, why wouldn't you teach from your favorite translation? Whenever there is an aphorism or concept that is best described, where we need to parse the language, we always use, we'll use the other translations. But I like this because I think it's the easiest book to teach from. Do you agree about that?
I'm a little bit caught up in your long disclaimer there.
Because we get a lot of howlers. I get more than you do.
People don't send me howlers.
No.
They don't send me anything, actually. I don't get any presents anymore. I don't get a chance.
That's not true.
I don't get flowers.
You were wearing a T-shirt yesterday that you got as a gift from some graduating students from last year. It said, I like history and maybe 3 people.
And maybe 3 other people.
Am I one of the people?
Well, you make the cut.
Oh, good.
Yeah, totally.
Good, I feel better. Anyway, aphorism 6. The unprejudiced observer, even the most sharp-witted one, knowing the nullity of supersensible speculations which are not borne out in experience, perceives nothing in each single case of disease. Each single case of disease.
Yes.
Other than the alterations in the condition of the body and soul, disease signs, befallments, symptoms, which are outwardly discernible through the senses. That is, well, actually, let's just stop there for a second. So I think this is really important because aphorism 6, number 1, has been, it got its claim, it got its moment in the spotlight as being the unprejudiced observer. It's sort of like the DEI aphorism in homeopathy. We treat everyone equally. Well, we should be doing that. Mm-hmm. There should be acceptance of everyone's individual way of being, and we should not judge, but rather be discerning about the nature of the problem. And as contemporary prescribers, we need to take into account things like social determinants of health. What happened? I remember working in a homeless shelter for 5 years. You can only have a level of expectation commensurate with what the person can do. If they are sleeping on the subway, right? They're, whatever, you understand. Okay. But that's not what aphorism 6 is about. Right? Just because Hahnemann says the unprejudiced observer doesn't mean that he's not talking about that. That should be a part of who we are, no doubt. In fact, we should lead with that as our heart and soul, right? And what makes a good homeopath. But that's not what this aphorism is about. This aphorism is really important because this is where Hahnemann says, and it's the 6th aphorism right up front, parked right in the beginning, where he says, You don't speculate, and you perceive nothing in each single case of disease. You're perceiving the disease. You're perceiving the signs and symptoms of what has happened since the person was last well. That's it. That's what we do. And then he goes on to say, how do you get that? It's what the patient feels, what those around him perceive, and what the physician observes. All these perceptible signs represent the disease in its entire extent. That is, together they form the true and only conceivable gestalt of the disease. That's it. Mm-hmm. The disease. Period. And when Hahnemann says disease, he doesn't mean, like, you're laughing at me. You get a kick out of me when I get all like...
You're all hopped up.
I'm all hopped up. I know. Should I calm down?
No.
But I think this is important because it doesn't, it all of a sudden the Constitution is like a different thing. It's what you come in with. But just to be clear, so what we're treating is the signs and symptoms of disease. Now, Hahnemann also goes on to talk about disease is not a named condition. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that is the part where we say we are not doing what the doctors do. No, we do it totally differently, right? But it is the signs and symptoms of that which is not integrated into the person. You're not treating their healthy state or their whole state. You're just treating the disease state, that which is not integrated. How do you like them apples, sir?
I like it. And so if we are preaching to the choir, then everyone's going, yeah, right, get on with it. But if we are actually talking to folks that have assumed some of these perceived ideas on a constitutional state and a constitutional remedy, then they have to be challenged by that, because you hear that Hahnemann is telling his pupils, all you're looking for is the difference between the healthy and the sick person.
Exactly.
That represents the totality of characteristic symptoms. Aim for that. That's your job.
That's your job.
Right.
That's it.
Good. Well, now that we got that clear, what else have you got for us?
Because Kent. So James Tyler Kent. Now, if the person who sent us that stuff, I am remiss. I didn't write back to that lovely person who sent the information about Kent.
Yeah, I've been in contact with them.
I haven't, because you haven't sent it to me, because I can't get into it because it's in the Dropbox that I don't have access to. Anyway, because anyone who listens to this podcast or knows me knows that I'm obsessed with Kent's inbreeding, and there was a time when I wanted to have a 6-toed cat named James Tyler Kent.
I think the term inbreeding is a little leading.
Okay, so there is some, would you say speculation or evidence? That,
no, I think it's pretty strong evidence.
That he's a product of the flowers in the attic. His parents were sister and brother.
Very likely.
Okay. And so, am I going to get in trouble for this? I always get a howler every week. No. Can you not say?
No,
but maybe you can't say.
I'm wondering what the problem is with that. Apart from, it's like, hang on.
Well, I just wanted a 6-toed cat named Kent. But anyway, but I wanted to just because Kent caused, oh my gosh. Going through life as me is a little tough.
Yeah. Poor you.
But what does Kent say on this? Because I think Kent gets a bad rap because it's post-Kent that is the problem. Kent himself, mustache aside, and he brought more eclecticism in, and I'm not sure, he has his own, he brought in more Swedenborgian ideas, more vitalism, mysticism that led to things that became problematic that we'll talk about in a bit. But Kent himself, you and I, do you remember one of the first conversations we had where we were testing each other about homeopathy? We had a couple drinks and we were talking about Kent, and we both at the same time, I forget how it came up, but it was well, read his case notes. And then we were okay, you're good. Yeah. Anyway, so Kent I'm reading now from Gibser, Kent's minor writings on homeopathy.
I would give that a hard G.
Gibser. How do you say it?
Gibser. Yeah. Klaus Henning. Gibser. Yeah.
People from New Jersey don't say it like that, but I'm good.
That's all right.
Okay.
You.
He writes on... Oh my God, you get me every time. All right. If you have your own copy of Gibser, it's on page 649, Temperaments.
Yeah, that's the one.
Oh, interesting. We see, I love this, we see many absurd statements in our homeopathic literature. Many of these statements are the ex cathedra statements of our ablest men. These are quoted and handed down as accepted and demonstrated wisdom. Our clinical reports are full of these traditional whims. The clinician reports a case that is clear and strong in the reasons for the use of the remedy that cured, but he ends his reasoning by saying that, in addition to the symptoms, he favored the remedy because her hair was auburn, or blonde, or dark, according to the remedy selected, which is fully approved by the guiding symptoms. Al just made a gesture of putting one's fingers in one's throat as if to make one vomit. Yeah.
Implying
so
that you give your pulsatilla only to women with blonde hair.
And sepia only to those with more manly features, or phosphorus, slender-hipped.
Angry Karens. Missing, therefore, the fact that you're 6'9" NBA basketballer that needs pulsatilla, you're going to miss.
You're going to miss.
You
say that as someone who has responded beautifully to pulsatilla in your day.
I do pretty good on pulsatilla.
And I've done well on phosphorus, and my hips, I don't know if I'd say I'm slender of hip. Did I ever tell you that my grandfather, when I was young, when I was, I was a ballerina, and he said something about I would never be a ballerina. He says, because you got big hips.
He said that to you?
And I was...
Did you punch him in the face?
No, he was a boxer.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why he said, because I was the tiniest little person. I didn't hit 5 feet till I was like in college. No, I was probably 5 feet something when I was in.
But boy, the hips.
I did not. I still don't even have big hips. I don't know why he said that. Maybe he wasn't talking to me. Anyway, so he goes on to say here, not my grandfather, but Kent. A man who is given to asking questions will naturally desire to know if pulsatilla ever produced light-colored hair, or has ever changed dark-colored hair to blonde. If the former, then it is pathogenetically related to the case. If the latter, it is clinically related to the case. If neither, then why give such reasons for selecting the remedy?
I love it. Is that Kent?
Yes!
That's really interesting. And yet he also is, well, maybe mal-ascribed with talking to his students in the classroom about Miss Pulsatilla.
Exactly.
Mr.
I know.
Sulfur.
Look, I'm just reading it from Gipsa.
Ignatia arsenicum. Nux vomica.
If pulsatilla has cured 50 consecutive cases in blondes without a single failure, when the symptoms were such as were produced in healthy people, is that an iota of proof that it will not cure just as speedily in brunettes? And if it is not a reason that it will not cure in brunettes when the symptoms call for it, does it appear a fallacy to give pulsatilla to a woman because she is a blonde? This is good, right? I mean, I'm not usually the one vindicating Kent, but I think if we're going to go down this road, it's in the back. It is on page 649. I had to dig deep. If dark hair is not a symptom of disease, this is the part that I like, because this is what relates to aphorism 6. If dark hair is not a symptom of disease, how can any physician use it as even one symptom in any given prescription?
Brilliant.
Right? This is it. If it is a natural condition, why think of it as one of the elements to be considered in making a prescription? If the hair must be red to be a distinguishing symptom in any given case, how red must it be to make the remedy clearly indicated? Or if only slightly red, what other remedies would shade in because of this slight difference in the color of the hair? And then he says, and it's italicized for emphasis, the true basis of a homeopathic remedy is the collection of signs and symptoms, and these must be morbid, has been the teaching of Hahnemann and his ablest followers, and such teaching is the only teaching that conforms to law.
See, it's really interesting. We give Kent a really hard time.
I really do.
Unnecessarily.
I don't know about
when you read about that.
But this is
good.
clear.
That's
and when he was part of the IHA, the International Hahnemannian Association, established in 1880 to restore homeopathy to its, to its roots, he must have been doing something, right?
That's really interesting.
I know.
So, while mentioning Kent as...
Wait, can I just say one more thing here? Just because I'm skipping down to the end, though. He says, one who knows how to find a homeopathic remedy for sick people does not pause long to take the measure of the normal constitution of his patient, who is changed from the normal to the abnormal constitution. This morbid condition of body or mind, or both, is composed of signs and symptoms not belonging to the health of the patient, no matter how recent or long-standing they may be. Okay? That's right. Kent, a little vindication of JT over here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got to give due where there's due. And I've been known to just linger on the mustache and the toes without, and the post-Kentian problem.
Well, the ism in Kent is the problem.
The ism is exactly the problem. And this is, and it's been propagated. Am I using that word correctly? Propagated over time? Perpetuated would be a better choice of a word.
Perpetuated over time.
Perpetuated.
Sure has.
Not propagated. Now, what am I saying?
Do you know who the homeopath that actually first correctly used constitutional prescribing in homeopathy?
Margaret Tyler.
No, she's one of the nonsensical perpetuators of the...
But I could tell you who was a part of the problem, which makes me irritated. Carol Dunham.
Carol Dunham
goes back, talked about the whole person.
Well, that's interesting because that's in the 1800s. He died in
1877.
So that's 50 years before what I was saying before.
Ah.
That's really interesting.
But he said whole person. I mean, I don't know that but he said whole person. Anyway, what do you...
No, the point that I'm getting to is that, you see, by thinking about what defines one's constitution, right? So you and I, you look at us, we're different. Our makeup is different.
Yeah.
I'm a
Swarthy pink.
I'm a pink hairy Scotsman from the southern hemisphere. You're a get dark in a
You tan in a warm room
in
Sicilian.
a warm room Sicilian. You know, we have different makeup. You know, and
We
the
do.
German word, I think, is, what is the word?
Is it one of those like Geistgemut? One of those.
Erbschaft or something like that. But anyway, the point is that the working definition, and the translation of constitution is makeup. And the person that talked about that the most in homeopathy was von Gravold.
Oh yeah, but I always say von Gravogel or whatever, but he talked about like the hydrogenoid constitution and the right.
Correct.
Yeah. But
And
that's
the oxygenoid.
yeah.
And the nitro.
Right.
And nitroid something.
Yeah.
And in doing so, he said quite categorically and correctly that we're not all the same, you know?
Yeah.
Some of us are big boned, some of us have got their eyes too close together, some of us, you know, our mothers dress us funny. And, you know, and we have a different makeup. And he said in exactly the same way as the Ayurvedic physicians do today, that determines what we will ever give to our clients. And therefore, if someone of a hydrogenoid constitution, then this ballpark of remedies is only going to be appropriate.
Right.
And in doing so, argued that this will help, well, this does help in prescribing, because it limits the number of available remedies for the prescriber
Right.
in a given situation.
Which people like.
Well, that's true. The problem is that, I mean, well, obviously there's a bunch of problems, because he decided which remedies were appropriate for the oxygenoid and the hydrogenoid.
Right.
And the phosphoric and the, you know, yada yada. He also seems to have thrown in the idea of miasms and miasmatic
Yeah.
predisposition into his description, and he seems to have forgotten about the presenting complaint and exactly what Kent said.
Yep.
You know, the signs and symptoms of the sick person. So that was the first time it entered, and in a way, it's the only, apart from a variation of it by this guy called Otto Lesser later, who might have been a Swiss Lesser, could have been French or Swiss, and later Vanier. Historically, later it was Vanier, who also talked about the makeup
Right.
in the choice of remedy for the prescriber. Those are the people. That's actually what constitutional prescribing is, or historically what it has been in homeopathy. Not.
Yeah, so let's talk about what it is now and how we got there. I'm actually, if you hear me clicking, it's because I'm looking for this talk that I have given a couple of times on sort of what happened, how homeopathy, it didn't even like bifurcate, but it splintered into all these different sort of ways of prescribing. I mean, you have like during Kent's time, because see, it's really hard because all of these things they're interwoven and intertwined. Like, you know, you could talk about Kent and say, okay, well, Kent actually was adherent to a lot of Hahnemannian principles, but he also changed a whole bunch of stuff in terms of posology, right? So Kent chose, even though the 5th edition of the Organon was available to him, he stayed with the 4th edition and was a centesimal, dry dose, up the scale prescriber, focusing on going to the highest potencies. And so and sort of equating that with like the spiritual nature of disease, which then confused a whole lot of things. On the other hand, you have across the pond, right? You get into Britain, and then you have like, was it Richard Hughes who was considered the anti-Kent? So there were the materialists in homeopathy who were prescribing it in really low potencies, like X potencies or low C. I think like 6C or 12C might have been even, 12C was like pushing it. Because there the focus was on the medicine and, and the sort of, are you going to give something materially or, in this higher potency? Now, all that being said, you've got at the same, so if you kind of go to the Kent time, right? So when was Kent here in Philadelphia? It was like
1880 till
1904?
The postgraduate school was 1890 till 1900.
1900,
So it was
okay.
10 years.
Okay.
And then he moved to Chicago.
And so there was, you have to see, one of the things I loved about studying medical history that I think has changed everything for me is you and we talked about this with Flexner, you have to see things in the time. Like everything has to be contemporaneous. Everything is relative to the time period it happened in. Otherwise, if you think everything has to be the way you think about it today, that's something called presentism. It favors everything as if it's better today than it was. Okay. Now, which of course is a big concept in medicine because people say, oh, do you really want to go back to the time before antibiotics and vaccinations? I'll let you decide. But what was happening at the same time as Kent was that there was this move towards sort of psychospirituality happening. So you've got Freud, and you've got this Victorian movement toward occultism. In other words, understanding things that are sort of mystical and magical. This is when people started doing seances, and it was a part of the zeitgeist of that time. And then it goes from there into Carl Jung. And this is, it's really interesting because when, a lot of the time when I've spoken on this is around sort of alchemy and medicine and materiality versus spirituality and how those things have gotten all sort of jumbled up. And we won't go into that, into all of that today, but suffice it to say that at the same time that Kent is around and sort of the ism, as you call it, Kent, do you say Kentianism or Kentism? Kentianism, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was all intertwined with this time of sort of psychospirituality and Freud, which leads to Jung, and sort of getting into the nature of the person. And so when Jung steps into the scene, he has taken these sort of alchemical principles and removed all the materiality. And he comes out and he says, oh no, it's all about the development of the inner person and all that. Well, that's fine in its own right. But there was a malappropriation, which has been refuted in contemporary scholarship, which we can talk about another time. But he sort of took this path, and then all these homeopaths piled on and adopted that. So they picked up the zeitgeist of the time and applied that to homeopathy. So what had been aphorism 6, the signs and symptoms of disease, becomes this the word constitution gets swept up in this heavily mentalized, psycho-spiritualized interpretation of homeopathy. Now the wheels are totally off the bus.
Well, I mean, and you're right. It's a million miles away from Hahnemann. But if you are focused on the disease from a different point of view, that the wound is a soul wound, and everything is a manifestation of that, then it makes sense that you're looking for other and more broader, threads in a sick person's case.
Yeah.
But I like where you went with that. That was really good. It also reminds me that there is an author, a modern author, that talks about constitution really well.
Who's that?
Is our mate David Little.
Ah.
And when it comes to talking about constitution, he actually argues that there is such a thing as constitutional prescribing if you understand constitution in the following way. And then he goes into the etymology of makeup, and he says what makes up the human being is the physical body and the signs and the symptoms.
Yep.
The mental and emotional themes and threads. He says the social functioning, the way in which the person functions, their sexuality, in terms of the and the way in which they engage.
Yeah.
And he talks about the job that people do. Also contributes to this broader understanding of the makeup of a person, and he says all of that, when analysed by a good functioning homeopath,
Yeah.
would contribute to a prescription. But he's not saying that prescription is going to be such that all people become blonde, or all people take a homeopathic remedy and go and levitate and go meditate in a cave in Tibet. But he's saying that all of that information contributes to a good chronic remedy, doing good chronic remedy stuff.
Right. So you take into account everything, because people are going to be living in a pattern where they recreate the same wound or same imbalance or unintegrated aspect of their totality over and over. And so that's going to be helpful. Now, we've kind of gone into describing constitution and how it, sort of is and isn't a part of things. But what does it mean to people? Like, if someone's stepping into homeopathy, imagine the appeal that you're on Facebook and someone says, you're a homeopath. Like, you start to assume that homeopathy is that someone finds your constitutional remedy, your, what I call the analog in nature, the soulmate idea, and that it's going to fix all of your problems. Wouldn't you just be dying for that? I mean, imagine.
Is?
I thought that's what red wine was.
Red wine and
red
chocolate.
wine and chocolate.
Yeah.
But that is
it's
right. It's an appeal.
It's really desperately unfortunate. It really is. You see it. Back in the day, what would have been a good example? What remedy does Harry need? What remedy does?
What I love to think about is when you're in your first semester of study in homeopathy school. Mm-hmm. There's nothing more satisfying than that, because you have 25 remedies under your belt. You've learned 25 types. Yeah. People think of it as, and then you could take all the people that you know and put them into a category. And the analogy that always comes to my mind is it's like having all your laundry done, and it's all folded and put away, and you're nude. And everything.
Why is the nude part important?
Oh, because all your clothes are clean and put away. There's nothing in the laundry basket. There's nothing on your. And it's such a clean.
I don't think I've ever experienced that. There's nothing in the laundry basket.
No, you would not have experienced that. You. But this idea of this sort of clean thing, we want to. That constitutional idea satisfies this desire to know ourselves, or with the homeopath, for the homeopath who can find us in that. But
it's a desire to be seen.
It is. And that's why the therapeutic relationship is so important, because you're seen in that. I had a clinic last night, and today is the follow-up to that. And we were talking about how sort of the therapeutic relationship, the homeopath is the first remedy. I love Jeremy's, when he talks about the poker principle, I see you and I raise you one. So the homeopath who mirrors back to the client, this is what I hear you saying. And the fact that you're able to take everything that a client has said to you and sort of transmute it and say it back at a slightly higher potency, that's a stronger similar. That's the first remedy. That's why people often say, I felt better after sitting with you for an hour, 2 hours, whatever. But at the end of the day, that's not the part of the healing thing. So when you and I were coming up through the ranks, there was all the follow the guru to who was going to find the secret remedy. And it was really exciting. We learned all these different, methods, and people were sitting on a dais and stuff like that. And that seemed but it doesn't, in their clinics, people don't prescribe that way very often, because.
Well, it is. There's a quote that I really like from Marjorie Blackie. So that's the Queen's homeopath in the 70s.
Yeah.
And she gets it wrong, but then she gets it right. She says the constitutional remedy is the thing that you give the person that meets the sum total of all of their parts. And for me, that's just a continuation of the ridiculousness of what we've just been talking about. But then she says, give it to the healthy person.
Exactly. I was just going to say, this is like a calc carb baby.
Yeah.
Right?
That's exactly right.
It's like a calcarbonate. And sometimes, and we'll talk about this sometimes in the clinic, every now and again, we're like, oh my gosh, this is a constitutional prescription. An otherwise healthy person, often a child, where there's no evidence of the chronic disease or the miasmatic disease, or in some cases, the remedies that we know to be these sort of quote unquote constitutional remedies are, remedies we recognize through their miasmatic nature of, someone who needs phosphorus, someone who needs, calc carb or sulfur. It's an otherwise healthy person.
I would say it's always a healthy person. It's
Yeah.
a healthy person that's a little sick.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or needs a tune-up.
Yes.
It's a well-made BMW that goes in for a tune-up once a year.
Yeah. But we don't see that very often.
I don't think I've ever seen it.
I mean, we had a really interesting case a couple years ago. Stephanie, one of our stellar graduates, was managing this case, and it was a child, and we were making a clinical choice. It was like one of the best teaching cases. And the choice that had to be made was, do we give the quote-unquote constitutional remedy, which I forget what we had given him. Maybe it was calc carb, I don't remember. Or there was a remedy that, in this case, what made it interesting was it also took into account mom's state during pregnancy. Mm-hmm. And she was dealing with a whole lot of stuff and needed Natrium muriaticum, which we gave. So when whatever we chose as the quote-unquote constitutional, it was calc carb, now I remember. And the conversation was, in this kid who was really healthy and he had like a couple little things, would we give the remedy that sort of fit this larger totality of all of his stuff, right? That would, in one kind of logic, put him into a better state, that would mean that his body his energy, vitality would take care of those symptoms. In other words, you raise the level of health, the symptoms fall away.
But what you're saying to me is it invokes just different languaging, and for me better and more accurate languaging around the size of the totality symptoms that you're
it's the languaging, because like when people say, like someone sent to me recently, people will send me things that they see on Facebook, and it's often, if they know me well enough, it will be prefaced by, not to raise your blood pressure, but
check out this nonsense.
But check out that, or just, so this person, this was on just on a social media thing. I think I might have found my constitutional remedy by reading about it. How would I test to see if it is? I mean, I feel bad because that's a reflection on us as a profession. Now, and so then some might say, well, how do you know that that's not what Hahnemann was really thinking about? Because some of the howlers that come my way are like, well, how do you know? Hahnemann might have changed things if he was around a while. Well, we have indications of what never changed over all these editions and where he was making changes and so forth. But Hahnemann was really clear as he evolved, developed, and perfected his system, which he uses the term perfected as he gets later on in the evolutions of things. Like by the time he gets to chronic diseases, 1816, from 1816 to 1828, he's working on this and he comes back and he's like really clear at that point. There are, and this is where the classifications of disease come in, there are acute diseases and there are chronic diseases. The chronic diseases, they have their, the miasmatic, they have that underlying miasmatic thing. And then you have surgical diseases and indispositions. That's it. Those are your categories. So if it's a surgical disease, it's like I got a problem because somebody cut me open to remove a thing and I need to deal with it. That's how I got quote unquote sick or out of balance. And indisposition, I ate too much fatty food and drank too much wine and now I have the gout. I love when people say like the gout.
I got the gout.
Got the gout.
Pop.
Yeah. I got the black lung, Pop. What movie is that from?
No idea.
Anyway,
somebody tell us.
Yeah, if you know what movie, it's the kid goes, I got the black lung, Pop. Anyway, someone who, because of their, whatever, they get a hangover is the best indisposition example that I can think of. And then you've got acute disease and chronic disease. And your chronic disease, Hahnemann makes it really clear that you don't just solve that problem. And he tells us that in Aphorism 171. So the Aphorism 171 is kind of the the proof that there's no one remedy answer. 171 that says, in chronic diseases that are not venereal, therefore those most usually arising from psora, one often needs to employ several anti-psoric remedies in succession to bring about a cure, each to be homeopathically selected in accordance with the result of an examination of the group of symptoms that remain after the previous means has completed its action.
Multiple consultations, multiple successive remedies.
Exactly, over time. Not a bazillion, but what, you're left with, what's there. Is the case stuck? Is it still moving? And you're assessing it over time. And this idea of totality, I like the word I like to use to think about totality. In other words, the signs and symptoms of disease. That's what you have to know to make a good prescription. And it's totality is fungible. That's the word I like, fungibility of totality. Sometimes a case comes to a point and you have this funny little totality left and you give like one of those funny little remedies. The remedy that often comes to mind for me, it's not a funny little remedy, but like the remedy helium, for example. I've had a number of cases over the years where where a person reaches this part of their journey where they have a very particular stuckness. I'll give you an example. There was this woman who I've worked with now since 2006, so 19 years. I remember it was 2006 because it was when I first moved back to Philadelphia. She's one of my earliest clients here. And she is a woman who, she never married. She lived with her, her extended family. Then they all died off. And then it was just her and her sister died. And she went through this whole thing and she did well. She had expressions of disease, which I treated over time. And then there was this point where for a while she was stuck in this, where all she talked about was how she maybe never should have been born, never should have incarnated, used the language right out of the helium proving, this whole idea of the soul entering the body. And it was so incredibly clear, right? And that was it. She was not, for a period of time, talking about other things. She was, relatively okay, except this. And it was that's a small totality recognition of a prescription. I'm not suggesting we do that all the time. I'm just, as an example of, there are times when something is big and times when something is small. And sometimes then it comes out and is bigger again, right?
Yeah, it's a great example.
Oh, I'm glad you like that.
I do.
I'm glad you
love
approve.
it. And I've seen exactly the same things, and sometimes it's about incarnation, and sometimes it's about mum, and sometimes it's about chocolate.
Sometimes it's about the hemorrhoid, the boil, the whatever.
All of that.
Can you pass the tea?
That is going to be cold tea.
That's okay. It's not, as long as it's not bitter. But, we have to wrap up. But I hope that this was helpful because, I think when we think about this, when we have clarity about it, it makes the job easier. Because if your job was to find someone's soulmate in nature from the bazillions of remedies that are out there, it's going to make your job more difficult. And I think that's why.
Then what happens next?
Well, right, exactly. Because then the idea is oh, you get this remedy, and I know I always say the same thing, but all your problems go away, you levitate, you never get cellulite, you always find a parking place, your husband always does the dishes, your dog doesn't poop in the house. There's, this expectation that everything just lines up. No gray hair, nobody has to get their hair colored anymore. Your manicure always lasts. It's like the opposite of that song. What's that song?
I hope you get a paper cut.
On your tongue.
On your tongue.
We can't say the rest of it. There's some naughty parts. But if you know that song, yeah. Why you always all on my back? Yeah. When I'm with you. Anyway, so
Ow.
Think about... I didn't do that to him. That's the cat. But think... Hey, you can't cuss on that.
Sorry, I forgot where I was.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, but so just think about that because it also, what happened though was this cottage industry of homeopathy sort of happens, right? So, and then when things go too far in one direction, in other words, you've got people who are trying to find this sort of soulmate thing and going crazy out there, there's always going to be a backlash, right? It's Newton's second law For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Is that the second law or third law?
I have no idea.
Second law. And so what is the natural backlash to this craziness of I'm going to prescribe based on the, job you wish you had and all this business, right? Then there's going to be a backlash, and the backlash will be maybe something really practical, like practical has its own meanings now, but like people who really found their way to like the TBR2, right? And so there's like the TBR2. So this is a sort of contemporary delivery of Benninghausen's methodology and repertory, and it only uses the 126 remedies, is it, from when Hahnemann was around. Okay, that's really fine, except the helium example I just gave, or the gallium cases, or the whatever. I mean, there are tons of remedies not there, but there are people who find that after they left this, quote unquote, I'm going to find the one remedy for people, which is really more of the simillimum fallacy that got caught up in the terminology for Constitution, right? So there's that. So the backlash on one hand becomes people become better prescribers because they're using a tool.
Well, they're more effective.
For the
problem that the person has.
Absolutely. Because it's a new way of looking at it. I'd love that. Or people who like polarity analysis. Can I say again how we got to spend time with Heiner Fry when we were in Scotland at the Faculty of Homeopathy conference? And I have to say that he's one of the nicest people I've ever met in my whole entire life. I don't say that like loosely. Yeah. I enjoyed his company so much I wanted to like spend more time. Right? Does he not like? And he's a pediatrician. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, what if he had been my kid's pediatrician? He's just like that nice a guy. Anyway, and so he came up with this polarity analysis, which basically we do naturally, which is if something has a tension of opposites, you need to favor that in your analysis of the case. Something that is both hot and cold, just as an example, or someone who's both hyper and whatever has lassitude. I mean, anytime that you've got these opposites, you'll use it, but because he put it into a package that comes away from everything is possible and it's really difficult, then people really love that. Or the other side is people go to protocols that are based on named conditions, which is kind of an allopathic interpretation of homeopathy. But you can see how you would naturally go to one of those realms if this idea of the constitution or the quote-unquote simillimum was the only other option. What do you think about that, sir?
I like it. Clear. And it seems to be what is going on out there in Homeo land.
I hope that this is helpful.
Yeah, I think it's been good. In fact, it's been spiritual.
Has it now?
I got to go see a client.
I've got to go work on the case for clinic. I have 2 hours to work up my lesson plan.
This person's life.
Yes. Hey, thanks for listening, people. If anybody out there is listening, well,
stay in touch and let us know your thoughts.
All right. Yeah. All right. See you, everybody.
Dreaming of becoming a homeopath, but you need a little more time to make it happen? The Academy of Homeopathy Education's part-time program gives a bit more flexibility to study. It's a 4-year journey designed to fit into your real and busy life. Learn more at AHE. You know about arnica. You've helped with a cough before. But what happens when your go-to remedies stop working? When symptoms move, change shape, or just don't make sense anymore? That's when it's time to get help from someone trained. At Homeopathy Help Now, you get real homeopathic care with student practitioners supervised by certified professionals. It's thoughtful, safe, and affordable. Visit homeopathyhelpnow.com to request a consultation today.